Hello there, welcome back to the Chap's Guide. My name is Ash and I am your host on this journey through men's style, self-development and personal grooming. Now life is an ever-evolving journey towards our ultimate and undeniable destination. However, on that journey, we're always evolving, mutating and changing as human beings. And my life has been very much a case of reinvention, change, move forward, keep trying to push towards a better future. Now, I normally talk about men's style. I talk about things, items, shiny, valuable items in many cases. Sometimes I talk about inexpensive items. But I'm going to talk about habits today, the 10 habits that I have undertaken throughout my life which have made a significant improvement in my life. Now my goal here is to provide you with actionable information that you can use on your own journey. I'm offering you some shortcuts because my journey, I'm 52 years of age. I've had a pretty standard life, nothing special. I'm very happy in my situation where I am today. I am content. But that journey hasn't always been that easy. And I'm giving you some shortcuts because if you're on your journey, you can use my shortcuts to get to your destination, to your happy pace, perhaps a little bit swifter. So I'm not going to give you all of these 10 tips or habits all in one go. I'm going to split them up over 10 videos over the coming weeks and months. And you may like them, you may not. It's a matter for you to take what you wish from the content that I'm going to provide. But it's going to be actual lived experience that I give you. I'm going to give you an insight into more about the man behind these videos, not just me standing here in a rather spiffy, tweed jacket and telling you I think this is the way you may choose to dress in your life. I'm going to give you the habits that have improved my life. So, let us begin. Now, the first habit I'm going to share with you is about alcohol. And to understand alcohol and me, you need to understand my history with alcohol. Because my relationship with booze has not always been an easy one, and I have to say it didn't start off that well. Now, I was born in a small mining community in South Wales, and back in the era I was born in 1970, so I was growing up and coming of age in the 1980s. A very hedonistic time, even for modern society. And back then, in those mining communities in South Wales, alcohol was the fundamental centre point of all socialising and all peer groups. And to a degree, I think it would be fair to say it remains that way, perhaps all over the Western world, but certainly in South Wales, because South Wales had a history of hard physical toil. The steel industry, the mining industry, men worked in very challenging conditions in the daytime. And as you will often find in such situations where people are really tasked hard in their daily jobs, they like to unwind, they like to relax, and they like to retreat into something which will either be typically, religious in nature or alcohol in nature. This is what I see if I look around the world, culturally. And in my culture, where I came from, people retracted to the pub. Men would come home from work, they would go to the pub, and that would be, where their peer group centred around. Their men friends, their love of sport would be shared in the pub by watching things on the TV, or just they became talking shops in the days before the television. My own town, a place called Aberdare in South Wales, about 20 miles north of the capital city of Cardiff, was very much an ingrained working class mining community where my grandparents and all my forebears would come up from working underground from a particularly hard shift, and they would more likely, if they had the cash to do so, because it was also an area where poverty was quite commonplace. People, lived a hand-to-mouth existence from pay packet to pay packet. If they had enough money, they would go to the pub, and that would be where people found their solace in life. And growing up, that's kind of what I grew into, this mindset that, alcohol was the socialising normality. And as a 16-year-old, as I was a fairly sort of average or largish kid really at that time, I used to go to pubs, as all of my friends did, my peer group. Now, of course, the legal age for drinking in the United Kingdom is 18, but I don't think anybody was particularly bothered about that, so we would go to the pub. I would have a couple of pints of beer, lager, and I would socialise with my friends. I would drink to the amount of money that I had. I used to start, as most of us did back then, to think about money in terms of how many pints of beer it would buy us. You know, if I had £10, that would be 10 pints. That would be my worth to the world, 10 pints. That's how I thought of money. When you're young, of course, you don't have the challenges of a mortgage and car payments and, you know, other things like that. When you have the luxury of thinking about money in terms of beer chits, you're a fortunate person. And of course, that was my ideology back then. We would go to the pub. We would meet up in the pubs in town. At 17 years of age, I took a bit of a leap and I joined the military. I joined the Royal Air Force. And then I embarked upon a 10-year career, which basically was, you know, Cold War period, 1980s, 1990s. And it was a very macho drinking environment. The military back then, and I dare say probably still is today to a degree, was a male-dominated industry. Mostly young men, some young women, but our socialising of choice would be drinking. And I spent more than half of my service in the military overseas. Now, when you're away from your home country in another nation, and, you know, what else do you do? If you can't speak the language, as I couldn't on both of the occasions when I was based overseas, we would socialise together in the bars which were provided for us on camp, where the alcohol was particularly cheap. And I got into that sort of regime of drinking 3, maybe 4 nights a week. And when I say drinking, I mean drinking. You know, it wouldn't be 1 or 2 drinks to relax. It would be 10 drinks. And on a weekend, maybe more. And that was just the way that our lives went. This was what all people in the military did. If somebody in our group didn't drink, we used to think they were weirdos. We would think, well, what's wrong with him? He doesn't want to socialise with us. You know, not once did we think, well, they were heavily involved in sport and they didn't want to drink. That was the way that we looked at each other. It was macho. And the more you could drink, the more respect you had from your co-workers and your colleagues. And don't forget, these are not people you just see in work. When you're in the military, you live in an accommodation block with these people. You see them in work, you come home, you have dinner with them in the mess, and then, you know, you retire to your accommodation where you're likely in the next room down or in the next bed down if you're in a large shared room. These are people who are closer to you than actual family, because you see them more often and you rely upon them. You place enormous trust in their hands in many cases. So, you know, you want to be part of the group, and that is very much the case when I was young. I embraced the drinking mindset of the young military man. Now, I left the military at age 27 and I joined, I think it was 27, might have been 26 actually now I think about it. But anyway, I joined the police. I joined the British Police Service, and again, back then in the 1990s, it was very much a male-dominated. It's far less so now. There's a lot more females in the police today, but back then it was very much a male-dominated industry where it was, again, macho in nature. They were, you know, it was all very physical. It was a tough, dangerous environment where risk was part of our daily work. And as a result, you know, you got quite jangly on the nerves, and often we would take a drink at the end of the shift. There was actually a bar in the police station that I worked at on my first posting in the police. It was normal policing practice. You would work your shift. After, to decompress, we'd go to the bar, have a pint, no more than that, because obviously most of us had to drive to work, but we would have a drink to relax. And that sensation or that association with relaxation and drinking became very much part of my life. I would often have a pint, drive home, and then have a few more drinks at home. And again, I got into that mindset of drinking heavily. My association with all of my peers back in my late 20s, early 30s, was very much centred around the public house. Saturday nights, I would go to the pub, I'd be in there all night, and I would drink quite heavily. And at this point, I transitioned away from beer. I'd started drinking hard liquor. I was drinking gin. A long time before gin was trendy, I have to say. And I chose gin because it gave me less of a hangover. I've always been somebody who has suffered with hangovers if I drink too much. And in order to get away from that, I decided to turn to gin so I could drink more of it. It was a pure spirit. It had less of an impact on my body, so I could drink more of it and more of it. And yes, if I'm looking back in hindsight now, when I reflect upon that period of my life, I have no doubt that I was drinking far too much. I was drinking probably 2 or 3 times the government guidelines for alcohol consumption for an adult male. And, it was just part of my ideology, my survival to get through life. Now, like most things in life, there are consequences to our actions. And Winston Churchill famously once said, when questioned about his drinking, he said, "I take more from alcohol than alcohol has ever taken from me." And I think he was a brave man to say that, because I think if we looked at Churchill's life, a man who was dogged with depression and probably was a borderline alcoholic for the majority of his adult life, regardless of how slanderous that may seem. When you look at his alcohol intake, it cannot have been healthy to drink the amount that he appeared to when we read sort of reports of his alcohol consumption. When I asked that question to my own life, I have to tell you, I think alcohol has taken more out of me than I have ever taken out of it. Because like I said earlier, I'm somebody who's always suffered with hangovers. Right? If I drink alcohol or I have just a couple too many, I will not sleep very well at all. Right? It will give me a very troubled night's sleep, and then as a consequence, the following day, I'm definitely not at my best. The other thing it does for me, I lost so many Sundays I can't remember, because I would wake up in the morning after having a heavy Saturday night and I was good for nothing. I could never have participated in sport. I couldn't have gone out and done some physical activity because I felt rough. I felt nauseous. I was dehydrated. I felt sick. And my day was basically getting over the hangover before going back to work. It's not a good place to be. The other thing, when you take on loads of empty calories which come with alcohol, you're going to gain weight. And sure to form, as I transitioned into my 30s from my fit and healthy 20s, when my body was much more resilient, I started to gain weight. I started to become chubby because I was drinking too much. Not only was I taking empty calories in when I drank alcohol, but of course when you drink alcohol, it affects your judgment and your decision making. So whereas I would never choose to have a greasy kebab at midnight on any other day of the week, if you gave me 10 pints of beer, I would make that judgment call. Of course, I want, the greasy takeaway food because I'm hungry at midnight. Damn the consequences, I don't care. Of course, you can't do that every day without it having a significant impact on your body. And by the time I'd reached my mid-30s, I was fairly significantly overweight. I was probably carrying, 2 or 3 stones more weight than I should have. I was considerably heavier than I am today at 52 years of age when I was 32. And that's not a good place to be. You normally get heavier as you get older. Actually, for me, I managed to turn that around. So for me, the consequences of taking alcohol were not positive at all. Now, one of the downsides of being heavy and not feeling that great on several days of the week because I was drinking, well, I've got to tell you, you wouldn't think it, but I suffered with low esteem. I wasn't happy with my appearance. I just didn't feel very confident in life. And yeah, it had a really negative impact upon me. Now, back then, of course, I would never have accounted the way I was feeling, the way I was looking to alcohol, because alcohol was such an ingrained part of my daily life. If I'd had a bad week in the office, and I would tell my parents this, I would say to my mum, my dad, God, it's been an awful week. I've seen some terrible things, had to participate in things which are rather unpleasant in work. The normal answer would come back, well, go out, have a drink, let your hair down. And of course, that's how many of us think about alcohol. That's our relationship with alcohol. It becomes the crutch to get us through difficult parts of our lives. Many people self-medicate when they have mental ill health by taking alcohol because they think it allows them to sleep better and to forget about their troubles in life. Of course, we know that's not true. Now, when we think about it in the bigger picture, it contributes to an ever-deepening problem. So why did it change for me? Well, I have to tell you, it changed for me in my mid-30s, and like many things, when we make a significant life change, there is a reason for it. And for me, it was when I met and married my lovely wife, Rachel. We met when I was just approaching my mid-30s. I'd been a bachelor for a little while, living on my own, which contributed to drinking a bit too much because I, didn't have anybody to be accountable to, and I rather enjoyed that lifestyle. But I met my lovely wife, and, she enjoyed a drink as well. We enjoyed a few bottles of wine a couple of times a week. We enjoyed gin and tonics, but I think I enjoyed them a little bit more than Rachel. And when we got married and we embarked upon our life together, and then we had our son, Alex, I started to think to myself, I really like this life. This is a life that I never thought was on the cards for me. I'd been this military guy, I'd been in the police, I'd led a very male-oriented life which was full of, challenge. So when I finally got this happy family life, I thought, this is for me. I like this, and I'd like it to last as long as possible. And I thought to myself, perhaps there are things that I can do which will improve my chances of living longer and shortening my life. And one of those things was a realistic grasp upon my alcohol intake. And I decided that I wanted to lose weight, become fitter, and take a grip of some areas in my life which I wasn't too comfortable with. One of those was the way that I thought about alcohol, my relationship with the booze. So I decided to lose weight, and in the process of doing that, I decided to not take a drink for 6 months. And I have to tell you, within a few weeks, I could see that my life had improved for the better almost immediately. I was sleeping a lot better. I wasn't feeling listless all the time. I suddenly discovered that there were 7 days in every week because I was gaining Sunday. Or I say Sunday, I didn't work Monday to Friday, I worked a shift pattern. But whatever day was my Sunday, so the day after I finished work, instead of feeling rough with a hangover, now that day was presented to me as a gift to do things with my lovely family. And that alone was worthy of stopping drinking in my mind. And many other things. Of course, the weight just shelved off me. I became much fitter, much healthier. I gained self-esteem. I gained self-confidence. My career grew to heights that I would never have expected. And I became the much more rounded person that I am today as a 52-year-old. Now, I'm not attributing all of that to stopping drinking. I did, there were other things as well, but certainly the alcohol consumption and stopping it to a degree really was a contributory factor towards the improved life outcomes that came my way. And, I wouldn't go back on it. After that initial 6 months, I didn't actually drink for 12 months. And I reluctantly started taking the odd drink here and there to celebrate a birthday or something like that. That was many years ago now. And there have been very, very few occasions where I've broken away from my promise of never drinking too much. I will have a couple of units of alcohol a week because my wife likes a bottle of wine. She won't open one on her own. She's conscious of doing that. So we will open a bottle of wine on a Saturday night and we'll have 2 glasses each over dinner or an occasion like that. Or if we go out to a birthday celebration, I will have a glass of wine or a glass of champagne. It's not a problem for me now because I understand and have come to terms with my relationship with alcohol. I know that for me, given the chance, I would drink too much. I would go nuts. There is alcoholism within my family. In the generations of my family, there are members who have been unable to control the allure of the things that booze promises us. An escape from the reality of the drudgery of life. Maybe an improvement to our circumstances right there in the moment. But I understand more about it now. I understand that it's only a temporary fix. And in the longer term, my life has been greatly enhanced by changing my relationship with alcohol. Now, another reason why I knew that alcohol and me were not on good terms goes back even further, a long time before I decided to stop drinking. It went back to a time when I was working in the police service, and one of my co-workers, who was a profound overdrinker, it's fair to say, said to me one day, "Have you ever thought about the way that you drink? Have you ever thought it's a problem?" And I said, "No, I'm quite happy with my drinking," because I actually thought I drink a far amount less than you, so I'm quite comfortable with that. And he said, look, why don't we take this test? I've been looking at Alcoholics Anonymous. And as soon as he said that, I thought, you must be joking. You know, I'm not an alcoholic. But he said, Alcoholics Anonymous, they have 12 questions which people are invited to ask themselves. Take the test, answer those questions honestly. It's a yes or no answer. And we'll compare how we both fare tomorrow. So I went home that night, logged on to Alcoholics Anonymous, and this test is still available on their website. And the 12 questions are relatively straightforward to answer. And it's questions like, you know, have you ever missed a day's work because you've had a big night and you've been unable to face work the next day? Have you ever, found yourself in a round of drinks with friends and buying an extra drink secretly because you want to drink a little bit more? Have you ever woken up and felt regret about something you did the night before when you'd be drinking? And there were 12 questions like that. So I answered these questions honestly, and in truth at that time, and I'll be honest with you right now, I answered yes to 7 of those questions. When I met my friend the next day, he said he'd answered yes to 11 of those questions. The advice and the guidance from Alcoholics Anonymous is that if you answer yes to 4 or more of those questions, you are probably in trouble with your relationship with alcohol. Now, even though I knew that 20 years ago and I took that test, I didn't let it alter my path. I continued the way that I was living my life and my relationship with alcohol. I say to you today, if you're sat there watching this video and you're thinking to yourself, if there's one habit I could change in my life which could improve my life journey to Chap Nirvana, take that test. See if it gives you the results which you're expecting. You may be surprised. I was an extremely competent, capable, professional man living an ordinary life. And I was almost twice over the limit where they would suggest that I had a problem with alcohol. Today, I don't answer yes to a single one of those questions. I do still drink. You've seen me on this channel enjoying a glass of whiskey from time to time. That's healthy, that's normal. My relationship is now under control, whereas it was not before. So I hope you have found some use today in this video. The first of my 10 habits to improve your life. I will put a link to those 12 questions on the Alcoholics Anonymous website in the show notes below. Ask yourself those questions and be honest. So, if you've enjoyed today's video, you can give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, click the red button. And if you'd like to support the channel, of course, you can buy me a coffee. And the notes which explain how to do that are in the show notes below. So until the next time, raise a glass, be it lemonade, be it water, be it whiskey. But make sure your relationship with whatever is in that glass is a positive one. Until the next time, take care.